Welcome into the September 13th episode of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. The Maple Leafs have signed Zach Aston-Reese to a PTO. What does that mean? Will he fit in with this group? Does he fit in the cap structure? We'll answer those questions and more on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also a writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts. If you haven't already, you can also check us out now on video format on YouTube. Just search up Locked On Leafs on YouTube and hit subscribe. What's going on, Dave?
Man, it's just hockey's coming back. We're gonna see some of it, but it's like you can taste it. It's like you can taste it coming back.
Well, you can, because for the last couple of weeks, we've been sitting here saying, like, there's been no movement in the free agent market. There's so many decent players, like NHL caliber players that are still available for the picking. And, you know, we saw Evan Rodriguez sign as a UFA, got himself a guaranteed deal with Colorado yesterday, $2 million one-year deal. That was a pretty nice piece of business by the Avalanche. And then we also saw the Maple Leafs dip their toes into the PTO market, and they end up signing Zach Aston-Reese. And Dave, this was a player who I believe you and I talked about back when we were talking about free agency and some of the potential players that Toronto could target. And Zach Aston-Reese was one of those players. So what was your first initial thought when you saw that Aston-Reese was coming to Toronto for training camp on a PTO?
Well, the first one was like nailed it, except half nailed it because it's technically not.
Yeah,
half nailed it, I should have said. It just seemed like the ideal fit, and it's funny because there was like mixed reaction of that signing when I saw it, and I'm just like, he fits a need in terms of a type of guy you're going to need for the playoffs. But somebody's like, well, Leafs are not exactly going to be bringing in a lot of bottom six scoring ability. And I'm like that's not really a concern.
No,
usually for the fourth line. Like I do, I think some people underestimate some of the additions that they've made to the bottom six. Like there are some guys that could score, but no, I do like this. Like it's funny because Dylan Ferguson was the first PTO they signed, and we were kind of like head scratching at that one.
right.
This one definitely makes sense, and I think. Elliot Friedman said on the 32 Thoughts podcast that there's pretty much almost like a deal outline of what it could look like if the Leafs do decide to move forward with Zach Aston-Reese. So,
did he mention figures or particulars? I didn't get a chance to listen this week, but I'm curious if he had mentioned what that should look like, because that is part of the equation as to it's interesting that he signs a PTO because he is a player that, as you said, I think would fit with the Maple Leafs. Like he would be a everyday player in this bottom six. I think that he is a more quality player than Wayne Simmons, is a more quality player than Kyle Clifford, than Joey Anderson. Like he is one of the, if he were to sign a contract, would be one of the team's top 12 forwards that should play every single night. And if you're not familiar with Zach Aston-Reese, he's not a household name by any stretch of the imagination, but he's a pretty solid defensive forward, and he's not going to give you much offense. He only scored 5 goals last year, had 15 points altogether. But he's pretty versatile, mainly plays the wing, but can play center in a pinch if you really had to play him there. He's got a little bit of jam. He plays with good speed. And what I like about him, Zach Aston-Reese, is what he can bring to you from a physicality perspective. because if you look at his numbers over the last 2 seasons at 5-on-5, his hits per 60, 13.92, which is 12th in the NHL. So he likes to get gritty and he likes to go after guys and lay the body, which is something that people have been clamoring for in Toronto for a while, especially in the bottom 6. He's a terrific penalty killer. You look at his top 50 shot blocker in the NHL with nearly 2.5 shots blocked per 60 at 5-on-5, a terrific shot blocker on the penalty kill as well. And then when it comes to limiting chances and high danger chances, which was a big problem Toronto had last year with their goaltenders, was allowing those high danger goals, 29th in the NHL in high danger chances per 60 given up, despite having 34%, just 34% ozone starts because he mainly started in the defensive end. So giving up the 29th least amount of high danger chances by starting a majority of his zone starts in the defensive end. Really good. I took a look at the numbers of the 28 players ahead of him in that mark. Only 3 had less ozone starts than Zach Aston-Reese. So when it comes to limiting offense, that is what he does. He has offensive limitations in himself, obviously, but that's not what you want out of your third, fourth line. You want guys who can go out there and who can play defensively, and he kind of will be the defensive replacement of what Ilya Mikheyev was able to bring, I believe, for this team if he ends up signing a deal.
Yeah, I think that's the big part there, right? Is, I think so I'm going to read the part that I had written some notes on the Fremont. I was just looking for it. So he is signed to a deal. There's not a deal on the table, but because he signed a PTO, but it's believed that the number is in the $850,000 range.
Oh, okay, so basically league min, which totally works with the Maple Leafs cap structure.
Yeah, so and the other thing Friedman said is that he wanted to stay in the East because I know Edmonton and Vancouver had interest in him. Friedman said he wants to stay in the East, so that gives the Leafs a little bit of an advantage there. Geography, as we have heard in the past. The deal itself is if you're trying to make him fit, it's very easy to just move out, even a Kyle Clifford or Wayne Simmons to make that contract work. Clifford's is at just over 750,000. He's not at league min, but he's just over that. But yeah, they can make this contract work, I think, pretty easily, depending on if Aston-Reese is the right fit.
Which again, I think he is. For the reasons that I explained, he fits that need of someone down the lineup who think about the players that they lost this year. They lost Ilya Mikheyev and they lost Andre Kasha, 2 players who they actually play who kill penalties. So they need a penalty killer. Yarncrow can do some of that, and also Zach Aston-Reese can come in and do some of that. So they needed to replace 2 penalty killers, and I think if they end up signing Zach Aston-Reese to a contract, which I would imagine they do, I think that he would help this team, and he's somebody who can go and be either. If you deploy in a perfect world, if you want to deploy like a full-on shutdown defensive third line, which we've seen in the past, a third line of like Zach Aston-Reese, David Kampf, and Calle Jarnkrok is a pretty solid third line, defensive checking line, shutdown line, right? Like if you think about it. So that is somewhere where you look at the fit, I think it works, and that'll kick Engvall probably down to the fourth line where he can bring a little bit of offense to that fourth line potentially in limited minutes there. So, I can see a path to some success with Zach Aston-Reese if the PTO goes well and they end up signing him to one. Because I would imagine, why do you think if there's a framework of $800,000 to $850,000 deal already agreed to, I mean, why not just make that signing? Why are you going through with a PTO instead? The only explanation is maybe they believe that some of the guys internally, it would block them from maybe getting a spot. It's the only explanation I can think of as to why it's a PTO instead of a contract if the demands are that low.
Yeah, I think you're right on that. I think it either has something to do with internal competition and just the numbers game, or Zach Aston-Reese might be looking for a little more, he'll do the PTO and see if the team will give him more of a guaranteed role, right? Because he's not coming into this with a defined guarantee. Like, there's no guarantee, right?
I think he
So
would be though. Like if Zach Aston-Reese made this team, to me, there's no doubt that he's an everyday player, either on the third or fourth line. No doubt in my mind.
yeah, I that's what we think, but we've also seen the Leafs kind of we think one way, and then Sheldon Keefe goes a totally different
Yeah.
direction as well.
You know what's really bizarre, honestly, in a way, like we heard Kyle Dubas at his year-end press conference say how much they're looking forward to having guys push from within, right? Some of the guys graduating from the Marlies. But based on the amount of depth signings that they've made this offseason, there's really not many, spots for the Marlies to break through and be factors on this team realistically, is there?
Not really, especially like I think on the back end, you could say because of how many veterans are there, it's tough to see any Marlies making a spot there. It's more so up front that you think, like, depending on if they make a move and trading out an Alexander Kerfoot, that opens up a definite spot on that second line. But other than that, like they continually say they want to give their young guys opportunity. And you're just like, where? Like, you can't play 14 forwards in a game. Like, currently, like, there's 14 guys up there, and like, where are they all going to play, right? And I guess yes, I know that injuries happen, and you're going to have to expect somebody to step in. But the Leafs don't have the luxury of having a big roster that they can have guys sitting in the press box and do the normal rotation.
Right.
There's likely going to be, depending on how do they do an extra forward, or are they going to do an extra defenseman? That's a question that they're going to have to figure out, especially with Sandin's situation. That's going to, I think, change a lot about that.
Yeah, and obviously Sandin still yet to sign, and we are officially, I guess, in camp week. Like camp starts this week. They start to report this week, and he is yet to report. And the Leafs right now, according to Cap Friendly, are 1.4 million over the cap limit. But as you said, they have 22 men allotted to that cap. They can take two of those guys out and end up being under the cap. But then you just don't really have any guys up in the press box or to take on a road trip with you, which sometimes isn't great, which prompts the question: is there still another move to be done to open up a little bit more cap space? Why don't we take a quick break and maybe talk about the possibility of that one after we tell you about our next partner, who has a product that I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 Athletic Greens because I wanted to better myself, Dave. I want more energy in life, and I overall just needed to have some better gut health too. So what is this stuff? Well, with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, energy, recovery, focus, and aging, all of these things. I tell you what, it really suits anybody's lifestyle, whether it depends what you're looking to do. You can send it to some family, you can send it to some friends, and they probably would really appreciate it as well. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy free, gluten free. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar. There are no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, artificial anything, while still tasting good. It costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. Just saying. It's cheaper than getting all these different supplements yourself. You're investing in an all-in-one nutritional insurance. And if you're curious, well, what about Athletic Greens? Does it have a good reputation? Well, over 7,000 five-star reviews. It's recommended by professional athletes and trusted by leading health experts such as Tim Ferriss and Michael Gervais. Athletic Greens was created when the founder experienced a ton of gut health issues himself and ended up on a complicated supplemental routine to recovery. It ended up costing him $100 a day. So he created the Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal solution for nutrition routine on your own. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with a convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements. And to make it easy for you, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do, visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We're your hosts here at Locked On Leafs. And starting next week, Dave, we're back to 5 episodes a week. We're back to daily episodes. So if it's your first time joining us here on Locked On Leafs, or if you just picked up over the course of the summer and you were tuning into our 3-time-a-week episodes, we're back to daily content for you. The only Leaf show that brings you daily content each and every day here on YouTube, podcasts, wherever you get your, wherever you want to get your content from. So make sure you're subscribed. Hit the little notification bell as well on YouTube, so that make sure that you get notified when we do drop new content every morning. All right. So we were talking about the Leafs as it sits right now, $1.4 million over the cap. We know they can easily get under the cap by taking 2 players off their roster and still having enough to ice a full 20-man roster on a game day. So they could do that to get under the cap. But do you want to be that close to the cap? Do you want to be just at that 20 number, or would you rather open up more cap space? I would argue that maybe opening up some cap space would probably be a little beneficial. How can they do that? There's a couple of different ways. But Dave, what do you think the Maple Leafs do? Do you believe that for now they kind of stay status quo and they try and get through the year by having just a 20-man roster for the time being? Or do you think that there's kind of a trade afoot at some point over the next couple of weeks through training camp before we get down to the first day of the season where cap compliance comes into play?
Yeah, I just don't know if the Leafs want to go shorthanded to start the season, just because injuries are likely to happen right at the start of the year. Guys get it back into the routine, and that's usually where little things start to happen. And we know that if a player suffers an injury, unlikely to try to make them play through it at the beginning of the season. So I still think a trade is coming at some point. It just feels like we're just waiting for a certain shoe to drop. I don't know which one it is, but it just feels like something is bound to happen. And but this also doesn't mean the Leafs are going to put themselves in a position where they're going to have an abundance of cap space either, right?
No.
That's just not going to be a possibility. This is just to provide them with relief that if somebody were to get hurt, they're not worried about calling anybody up.
So what's that move? What's that move, Dave? Say it.
I still think it's Kerfoot. It's got it. I understand that Alexander Kerfoot does have a purpose on this team, but this is a time where you brought in Calle Jarnkrok, who is a very versatile player, can play the wing and play at center. Even we heard Frankie Corrado say in that interview last week, which if you haven't watched yet, you guys should all listen to that. It was a great talk there. In the second part, he talked about how Adam Gaudette could be a guy that steps in and plays center too. So really, you're having Kerfoot right now. I'm not saying it's a luxury because I don't think he's a luxury player, but on this team for what he makes, I just don't see that as something that the Leafs should be holding on to. Especially last year of his deal, likely not going to be coming back. He's likely going to look to get a better, get a long-term deal from a team that can actually afford to give him a long-term deal going forward.
Yeah, I don't know how many teams are going to be lined up to pay him more than the 3.5 he's making now, but he definitely has a role on this team, and they clearly the organization sees a little more in Alex Kerfoot than a majority of the fan base. I want to bring up this article that Travis Yost of TSN He read, let me just pause this for a second. He wrote on tsn.ca. I'm going to bring it up here for you, Dave. I'll share the screen and I'll bring it up for those who are watching on YouTube. You can see here are some stats and some analytics. I'll tell you what these charts mean if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening, I'll explain what they are. But
Maybe
essentially,
zoom in a little bit. Can you zoom in a little bit?
yep, I can do that just a little bit, I believe. Does that work?
Yeah, I just don't want anybody who has the old eyes be squinting trying to see it.
So the way that this chart works is essentially he was looking through and he was trying to see, okay, what's the second line going to look like for the Toronto Maple Leafs? And Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander right now on paper looks like it's probably going to end up being the second line for the Maple Leafs. So he went through and he decided to take a look at the numbers, the even strength numbers over the course of the last 3 seasons from 2019 all the way up to the end of last year, and just to see, okay, what do these 3 players, how do they perform relative to expectation, relative to actual production. Also, when you look at their Corsi percentage. So if you look at it, the yellow metric is actual goals for, the light blue is expected goals for, and then the darker blue bar is for Corsi percentage, which is shot share. So when it's Kerfoot and Tavares on a line by themselves, they seem to score a lot, but they don't seem to produce a lot, and the expected numbers are quite low. When Nylander's wasn't on a line with Kerfoot and Tavares and he was by himself, he actually had some really solid numbers with goals, expectation, and chances all kind of mirroring each other to all very close together, which you hardly see. But when those 3 are together, Kerfoot, Tavares, and William Nylander, when you look at the production, it hasn't been as strong as expectation. And I know there's a lot of people rolling their eyes when you look at expected numbers, expected stats, but Kerfoot, Tavares, and Nylander have been snake bitten as a group. They should be a lot more productive than they have been. And the numbers show for it, right? Their chances, their shots, their high danger shots. They just haven't been able to put the puck in the back of the net relative to expectation. And you can see that based on their actual goals compared to their expected goals. And if you look at all 3 phases of, the combinations, they tend to do the best when they're all 3 of them are together on a line. Expected wise, like the process looks the best. The results aren't quite as great as obviously apparently the Kerfoot and Tavares line is, but you think that this eventually should break and they should go closer to even with each other based on expectations. So, I think that moving on from Kerfoot, as much as people say is easy to do and they should do, and it would open up cap space, like a lot of cap space, and give them a lot of flexibility. I think it's difficult for the Leafs to do because they look at that and they say, we like the process, and eventually the goals are going to start to come. And I'm not as sold as people are that they're willing to trade away Alex Kerfoot, because not only the performance that he has at 5-on-5, which, by the way, what do you have, 44 points I think last year at 5-on-5, which is like fourth on the team, which is pretty high. But also, like, they perform pretty well as a trio. They haven't been they've been a little unlucky, you would say, and they're hoping that luck would change. But not just his production, but the versatility. The fact that you mentioned he can play down the middle, he can play on the wing, he kills penalties. He's a very good penalty killer, and he can also play on your second power play unit as well. So he's extremely versatile and fills a lot of needs and fills in a lot of roles on this team. I know he's a secondary player, but he's a sneaky important secondary player for Sheldon Keefe in particular. So I'm starting to come around to the fact that Kerfoot might be here to stay. He might be here to stay if a deal hasn't happened already. I think probably Justin Hall is the guy who they may move on from and create, $2 million potentially in cap space by moving on from Hall. If they can get Sandin signed to a cheaper contract, and then the difference of Hall and Sandin would be, I suppose, the cap space that they're able to get, and maybe that's enough to be able to have one of these $850,000 contracts, to have that extra player in the lineup. That's at this point where I'm leaning the Maple Leafs end up going.
But it's almost like a similar thing with Justin.
That was a lot of information that I threw at people. I'm sorry if I lost you there, but I thought it was a really good article by Travis Yost, so I wanted to give him a shout out for that chart, because I thought that it kind of detailed and outlined the fact that that trio, although it gets talked about not being good enough, and Kerfoot gets dogged for being on that line because the production hasn't been there, the chances have been there, and they should be scoring more, and eventually you think the pendulum's going to swing the other way, and the goals will finally start to go into the back of the net.
Yeah, I just think the only thing about that with the Kerfoot is he's the third guy on that line. So the Leafs have to basically figure out, if we were to move on from Kerfoot, can we find somebody else to do what he does on that line? Because that would essentially, that's the guy you're replacing, right? You're not replacing a Tavares or a Nylander on that line. That's where I'm more like leaning towards you could potentially move if you feel you can replace him. But that's the caveat. You can't just trade him and say, all right, we'll figure it out. No, if you're moving somebody off that second line, you have to be.
So here's the thing, Dave, right? So this is with all three of them, but if it's just Nylander and Tavares and whoever else is with them, but when those two are just on the ice together, their numbers, like their expected numbers and their actual production is lower than when those three are on the ice together. So they actually have better production, or better process, better results when Kerfoot's on their line compared to anybody else, right? So you look at literally the goals for was in the negatives last year when Tavares and Nylander were together. But even their expected numbers, their expected goals for, is less than when Kerfoot's on the line with them.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I'm just wondering though. This is nothing against Kerfoot. I'm just wondering, can you not find somebody who's cheaper to be on that line even as a more of a defensive, just somebody who can help in those defensive areas? That's what I'm wondering.
Maybe like Nicolas Aube-Kubel, perhaps. Nicolas Aube-Kubel. I mean, I've always been a Pierre Engvall guy. Could you toss Engvall up on the second line?
Somebody's brought up. I can't remember who it was, but I saw somebody say maybe Engvall can go up there.
I've brought it up. We brought it up on the show. We talked about it early on when we did our initial first mock lineup of the season.
Right.
I think I discussed having Engvall up in the top. I can't remember if I actually had the stones to put him there. Maybe I will. I think we're going to have to do another one this week. Now that it's camp week, like pre-training camp lineup, we'll have to set a roster here. But yeah, we'll see what they end up doing. But I believe a move will be made. I just don't know if it's going to be Kerfoot like we're all anticipating. I'm leaning the Justin Hall route, and they end up making it work with Rasmus Sandin. All right, we got to take one more quick break. When we get back, we'll talk about the Maple Leafs rookie tournament starting in Traverse City this week as well. We'll tell you about some of the top players that'll be at the tournament, and also let you know about the schedule so that you can follow along, because it all starts on Thursday, so just a couple of days away. All right, so we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. You'll listen to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We're hosts here at Locked On Leafs, the number one Leafs podcast on YouTube, I would say, daily podcast. Make sure that you are subscribed to us. That would be greatly appreciated. And share with your friends. Tell your friends and comment below anything that you want to ask us down below. If you have any comments to what we've had to say so far. Are you a fan of the Zach Aston-Reese signing? Would you like to bring him in? Would you think that Kerfoot should be on the way out to create cap space? Is there another move that you would do? Let us know down in the comment section below. So, Dave, the rookie tournament starts in Traverse City just ahead of training camp officially kicking off. I think it officially kicks off, Monday, I think. Like, they technically will be there. I'll be on location, actually, at the there's a golf tournament that they're doing on Monday, and I believe I'm going to be on location with Leafs Lunch, so that'll be pretty cool. But this weekend, ahead of that, is the rookie tournament for a lot of the rooks for the Toronto Maple Leafs. A lot of the young guys just to kind of get their feet wet, get back into things. So the teams that they'll be playing in Traverse City this year will be Columbus, St. Louis, Dallas, and Detroit. Now, obviously, Toronto being the fifth team. And it all kicks off Thursday, September 15th. Toronto will be playing the Dallas Stars. That'll be a 6:30 p.m. game. And then the following day on the Friday, Toronto plays St. Louis at 6:30. And then they're off on Saturday. And then Sunday, they play Columbus at 2 p.m. And then they play Detroit at 11 a.m. on Monday, September 19th. So they'll have 4 games that they'll be able to play that you'll be able to watch. Yep, I actually get to watch some Maple Leaf hockey. I know it's not quite Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and Michael Bunting and company, but you'll still be able to watch some of the up-and-coming prospects. Fraser Minton is going to be there. A lot, there's going to be, I don't believe, Matthew Nyes, I don't think is going to be there because he's off to college. But
and the European players.
Yeah, and anyone else other than, I guess, Minton that you're excited to watch? Ty Voigt will be another guy who's going to be at camp. But who else are you excited to kind of get a glimpse at this rookie tournament?
Minton is probably top of the list. I would assume Moldenauer would be there.
Yep.
If he's
honestly, that was the name that I was looking for, and I just could not remember the name of the kid's name. I was just looking it up as you said it. Moldenauer. Thank you. I want to say Heffenhauer, but I'm like, no, that was like a prospect from years ago. Moldenauer, there it is.
Yeah, like that. I would say those are the 2 guys I'm gonna. I mean, when we figure out the actual roster, like the official roster, but those would be the 2 guys I'd be looking to see when that eventually happens.
Yeah, like the official roster has not been posted yet because I was looking for it.
Yeah, it has not.
Because I couldn't see the official roster. Obviously, once it does get posted, we'll do a breakdown. Maybe we'll try and get one of our great prospect guys to come on the show and help break it down with us. But I think there's definitely going to be a bunch of solid former draft picks that I'm sure will end up being there that everyone's going to be excited to see. Whether it's from this year, last year, the past couple of seasons. Maybe Kale Abramov might end up being there. Maybe you could see a guy, like Brandon Lazowski probably will be there. Leafs 7th round pick from the season. Probably going to see William Villanova, I would think, could potentially be there, fresh off his Memorial Cup victory. So there's a bunch of guys who could potentially find their way there that you'll be able to see that could be future Maple Leafs. But it all kicks off Thursday, September 15th. So we're excited for that. We'll obviously get some more information to you as that starts to trickle out. All right, Dave. Fun stuff today, buddy. It was good to get back after a weekend here. Get back to it. I'd like to thank everyone for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcasts and platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Also, obviously, subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Leave a like and a comment as well. Hit that little notification bell so you know when we put out new content for you. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti. Also follow the show at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back for another episode tomorrow, folks. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.